Former Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser is calling for a royal commission into Australia's management of offshore processing, and he joins us now from Victoria's Mornington Peninsula. Malcolm Fraser, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Why do you want a royal commission? What do you believe that will achieve?
There have been two earlier inquiries into the Department of Immigration in Howard's time, the Comrie Report and the Palmer Report. Nobody was held accountable. The inquiries were extraordinarily severe and underlined the incompetence of the department virtually from top to bottom. But nobody paid a price, nobody was accountable, nobody was held responsible. Now, it's quite clear that the department is ultimately responsible for what's happened on Nauru and Manus Island. They put people in place, they've allowed the most terrible conditions to prevail. What's happened on Manus is not new. It has been going on for months and months. The department have known that, and it's only a public exposure that has brought it to light, brought about, hopefully, some change. So what's wrong with the department? That's the first thing. The second thing, what's wrong with the policy?
Well, I was going to ask you that. To what degree do you sheet responsibility home to the department versus the policy, or is it the two in lockstep in your mind?
I think they're in lockstep. It's the kind of policy I would expect the department to recommend. In my time, even, they recommended fixed detention centres in the middle of Australian deserts. So they had that mindset over many decades. But the policy is wrong, because if you really wanted to stop people getting on boats, you'd establish a major processing centre in Indonesia with UNHCR. Hopefully Indonesia would agree to that. But then there would have to be an understanding that they weren't going to be left with the problem. And when we did this in relation to the Indo-Chinese exodus, we told Malaysia, look, Australia is going to take very large numbers of people, America is going to take very large numbers of people, and Canada would take large numbers of people. That was a real regional solution. And clearly the numbers could have become too great for Australia to handle, but that all went smoothly. I know during that whole process, many people from Indochina did drown at sea. They were often leaving in what was not much more than riverboats. And before the agreement with Malaysia, Malaysia was pushing people back out to sea because they believed they'd be left with a problem they could not handle. Well, we helped them handle it, and we know the results of a vigorous, vibrant Vietnamese-Australian community. Now, why, if you have a processing centre in Indonesia, the incentive to get on boats is taken away. But when the government says they're going to increase the overall humanitarian intake to 20,000, if they'd wanted to take the pressure off getting on boats in Indonesia, they would have allowed several thousand of that quota to go to Indonesia. But no, they went to places far, far afield, and the increase for Indonesia was only a matter of 100 or so.
When it comes to a regional solution, Malcolm Fraser, the former Prime Minister, Julie Gillard, would, I'm sure, make the point, well, she attempted that, but couldn't get bipartisan support. How important is it to have bipartisan support if you want an outcome like that? And also, what do you think of the bipartisan agreement that we seem to do have now, but it's in terms of a much harder line policy about sending people offshore?
Well, it's a much more, yes, it's a much harder line policy. It is a very unpleasant policy. It's threatening people really with imprisonment on places like Nauru or Manus Island for many, many years. Well, we didn't find anything like that was needed. And is there any evidence that the government has tried to get the United States or Canada involved as refugee receiving countries? If they have done that, they haven't spoken of it. And that's going to be necessary. You can't just have a regional approach involving countries of our immediate region.
Yes.
And I'm not sure in terms of regional approach if the government is much better than the opposition, because the government comes away from Indonesia saying support for the Bali process. I'm told the United States joins the Bali process for the first time. And then we have this certainly not Bali process arrangement with Papua New Guinea. So that is not a regional process through the Bali process. It's something quite separate, something quite different.
Malcolm Fraser, do you believe that it would be possible to come to some arrangement with the Indonesian government to set up the sort of the UNHCR-run holding centres that you speak of? Do you think that's actually something that could be achieved now, either through diplomatic means or financial means?
I do. I think it would be much more difficult because we don't have all that many friends left in Indonesia because of the way we've gone on about turning boats back, and the general relationship is not as close as it once was. But I believe that if we could persuade Indonesia that it's not only Australia but New Zealand, the United States, Canada and perhaps other countries would take people from that centre, then I believe they would accept that. I do not believe they would accept that if they felt that they were going to be left with the problem of resettling tens of thousands of refugees.
And when the Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, says if you want to stop people dying at sea, if you want to stop these boats sinking and children being pulled dead from the sea, then you have to have a response like this. You've got to tell the people smugglers that all people will be taken offshore and settled in a place like Manus. What's your response to that?
My response to that is that if you've got a holding centre in Indonesia, there is no incentive for people to get on boats. And that's the one thing the Houston Committee seemed not to understand, and the Gillard government did not understand, and Kevin Rudd does not understand. I do not believe you need the brutality of the policy of deterrent. If people are genuine refugees, and when they stopped processing people from, in August of last year, up to that point, a little over 90% of those processed were found to be genuine refugees. Now, if they are genuine refugees, there is no deterrent that we can create which is going to be severe enough, cruel enough, nasty enough to stop them fleeing the terror from which they flee in their own lands.
And Malcolm Fraser, what do you make then, turning to the opposition, of what's being suggested at the moment, their response to this situation, which is a much more military one, involving the military and a boosted operation there to repel the boats that might be trying to make their way here?
It'd be the same thing. What I propose would make all of that unnecessary. It would also be infinitely cheaper. Australians have not been told the total cost of our border protection program. It runs into billions. Keeping people on Manus Island or Nauru costs a huge amount of money, which could be very, very much better spent in other ways. But all of the opposition policies would not be necessary under the proposals that I've suggested, which are not new. They were tested, tried and successful when there was the great exodus out of Indochina after the Vietnam War.
And just turning to politics and the looming federal election, Malcolm Fraser, you're quite active on Twitter, and you recently tweeted this: Liberal Party's best bet, switch to Turnbull if they want to win, ! And you linked to a story there from The Age that makes that point in the article, that if the Liberal Party wants to win, they should have Malcolm Turnbull leading them. Would that be your preference?
Well, I think my Twitter stopped at Liberal Party's best bet. The rest of it was in The Age.
Do you agree with that line? Liberal Party's best bet, switch to Malcolm Turnbull if they want to win, ! Do you endorse that view?
Well, a lot of people think so, but in the last polls, Labor started to slip again. So the Liberal Party will take hope from that.
What would you like to see happen?
Well, I'm not going to say that.
Why not?
Why not? Well, I've said enough in relation to refugees, and I will continue to speak out on that issue, on human rights issues, but I'm not going to actively participate in this federal election.
Would someone be drawing a long bow if they interpreted that tweet as indicating that that seemed to be the way that you were leaning?
I think this current government has been so incompetent, it does not deserve to be returned. Kevin Rudd will want an election quite quickly because he will not want enough time to remind Australians why they were glad when Julia Gillard took over. So I'll leave it at that.
Malcolm Fraser, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much for making time.
Thank you, Virginia.